talk about like state of the animation industry and how you guys can try to get in during this weird time where you can't meet anybody in person, and it's hard enough for a professional to try to get a job under these conditions, but for somebody who's brand new to the industry, when you haven't built up a network yet, and meeting somebody in person helps a lot at the beginning. So, but there are ways, it's a pretty, this industry is expanding, and every day more shows are getting greenlit, and the technology is starting to keep up with the demands and being able to even work from home. And it's pretty incredible how quickly we've adjusted to work from home. Although I gotta say, even though I'm kind of enjoying work from home, I'm hoping that we can get back to seeing each other, because that's it's a nice job. It's a nice balance between working on your own for a little while and then being able to reconnect with the other artists around you and generate ideas. It can be really stimulating to be working together directly. So let's see. So we are hosting, that's the main reason we're hosting this evening, is just to kind of do some outreach and let students know that we are a resource for you. If you go to the Guild website, there we have wage surveys in our contract that gives wages on different jobs and positions. So it's a really good way to know what you should get paid for the job that you're trying to get into, or even the variety of jobs that are out there. So please try to go to our website and use as many of the resources that are on there as you can. If you have a hard time navigating the website, you can email me directly. My email is on that website. So we will try to point you in the right direction. There's several on there. Every board member, Steven Silver is a board member, Paula Spence is a board member, Emily Wallace is also a board member. We're all on that website, so if you want to reach any of us, we're available. Okay, so since we only have a little bit of time and we have so many wonderful people here to talk to, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Alexi. So wait, I'm closing this door so you don't hear my whiny dog. I'm going to pass it off to Alexi, and she's going to introduce the panelists, and then they will give a small introduction as to who they are.
Great. So each of the panelists will have a chance to introduce themselves and also tell you a little bit about their journeys into the industry. So I'm not going to go in alphabetical order, but I will just start with whoever's on the top of my screen, which is Paula. So Paula, I will start with you, though you might be frozen.
Oh, am I frozen?
There you are.
Can you hear me? Okay.
We can hear you.
All right. My name's Paula Spence. I am an art director, and I'm at Cartoon Network. I've been there for about 15 years, working on things like Flapjack and Regular Show and Close Enough. And right now, I'm the art director in the shorts program, so I'm overseeing the art on most of the shorts and pilots that are made at the studio. Alexi, should we talk a little bit about how we got into the industry, or do you want to move forward? Okay. I the industry in late 1998, right before I turned 30. I had a college friend who happened to have fallen into animation. He was working on a new show called SpongeBob SquarePants, and he asked me if I wanted to come work for him. And I did a test along with 5 or 6 other people, and they chose my test, and I got the job. I worked in backgrounds and doing props and whatever else anybody would let me do for 5 or 6 years, and then I got my first art direction job, and I still like to moonlight and freelance and do whatever artwork I can do, and always looking to get into, I don't know, what's next. That's it. Who's next, Alexi?
I'm going to move to Steven Silver.
Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for being here today and taking the initiative because this is great. This is where you get to hear everything first. I'm a character designer in the animation industry. I started back in 1997 on a show called Hysteria at Warner Brothers. And the first thing I actually did before I came up to actually working in animation, when I got inklings that I might get hired, I actually called up the union and I said, can you tell me how much a character designer is supposed to make? And I think it was Lynn, who was still there in 97, and she gave me a list. So absolutely know what your rates and everything should be. And so I got my start in 97 at Warner Brothers. And for the last 12 or 13 years now, I've just been working as a freelance character designer within the studio. So I was in-house for many years, and now I'm a freelance guy. So if there's any questions that ever come up with that, be happy to answer.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Okay, Roger, Oda, you are next.
Oh, hi guys. I am currently a background designer at Titmouse on the Critical Role project, which was big on Kickstarter, and now it's an actual show. I actually came up to the animation programs, from college. Like, I graduated from CalArts. I also attended UCLA that has an animation workshop. I'm from the Bay Area, so I used to go to De Anza, which fed into San Jose State, so pretty familiar with the schools there. And it did take a while for me to get into the industry. Even though I was studying animation, you don't get to control when you get in the industry. You don't control the economy. You don't control a lot of stuff. So it's a lot of trying. It took me a while, but I got in at Titmouse pretty early for Metalocalypse. And at the time, Titmouse was small. It was like, they only had one show and everybody in the studio worked on it. Now they have like a lot of shows. But I was fortunate enough to get in there, and they were looking for, young artists, and I got trained there, and that's where I got my start. Since then, I've worked in television animation as a background designer, going from different studios. I get to go to different places like DreamWorks and Warner Brothers, and Fox. So I've worked on American Dad, She-Ra, Critical Role right now. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And the whole time, if you get to stay in the guild, you get to know more people. And it is, after all, a smaller industry. So like, once you go to one place, and you start seeing the same people at the other studios as well. So that's how I got in.
Great, thanks, Roger. Mairghread, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mairghread Scott. I'm a writer and currently working as an executive producer on an unannounced show that will be out in years because this is animation. So yeah. Recently, my most recent project was I wrote a Justice League Dark Apocalypse War for Warner Brothers. Also written their other movie Wonder Woman Bloodlines, Marvel Rising Secret Warriors, as well as being a writer on things like Star Wars Resistance, a lot of Transformers property, and my favorite, Lego Jurassic World, Legend of Isla Nublar. So I like, the bigger the title, the better. So.
Thanks, Mairghread. Jorge Gutierrez, you are next.
Hello, I'm Jorge. I am currently writing and giving my lifeblood and everything to a movie series at Netflix called I Am the Three, and working on a bunch of other unannounced things. Before that, my wife Sandra Kiwa and I had a show called El Tigre on Nickelodeon, and then I made a movie called The Book of Life, also with my wife. And right out of school, I went to CalArts. I went to experimental animation, which, it's super hard to get a job when you're doing super experimental things because they kind of don't fit with what the industry's doing. So I really struggled right out of school. It was very hard. And I taught myself Flash, after studying CG animation for years. I got a pirate software version of Flash, and I taught myself Flash. And in 3 weeks, I made this little cartoony short. And this is year 2000, and somehow Sony Pictures saw it and offered me my first show, and I thought, this is the greatest country on earth. They just give you your own show out of school, and it ruined me for the rest of my life, thinking that that's how it worked. And then from there, I bounced around. Eventually, that division shut down through TV, and I was certainly not the most talented artist, but my I guess my weapon, my trickery was always, I'm just gonna outwork everybody, right? I'm gonna cheat by working more, and that's something I learned in school. It was, they would give us an assignment, and I would do 10 and not tell anybody, and then just curate and turn in the best one, and that was my way of cheating through school. I was gonna just do more, because advice for all the students: artists are super lazy and easily distracted, so that's your in. That's how you beat everybody. Anyways, so that's kind of my story.
Thanks, Jorge. Marc Scott, you are next.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Marc Scott, no relation to Mairghread Scott. This is the first time we're meeting virtually. So I am currently at DreamWorks Animation, where I've been for the past 15 years, actually. Actually, more than that, I think 17 now. I'm currently a visual effects supervisor on Boss Baby 2, which I've been on for about a year and a half now. I started my career in 1995. I was lucky enough to get an unpaid internship at a video post house, which was 85 miles away from my house. So I had an 85-mile commute, which I did happily because I was so excited to be in the industry, and I thought, this is my in. The internship involved returning the boss's dry cleaning and getting coffee for people and things like that. But the benefit was I could stay late and learn the equipment, which there were only a handful of systems at the time that actually existed that were able to do visual effects. And this company did the visual effects for like Star Trek: The Next Generation and a few other shows. So that was my in. So yeah, I worked this unpaid internship for about 6 months. It was terrible, a commute. It was 2 hours, and then the freeway collapsed. So then it was 3 hours just to get there to work. But I absolutely loved the industry, and I wanted to be in it. I knew this was my in. So I stayed late. I worked my butt off. Same thing Jorge said, like literally, it's like you just got to work harder than everybody else, 100%. I did eventually get a job as a compositor. I worked for some really great companies. I've worked for Digital Domain and ILM. I eventually ended at Disney. Disney ended up having a live action visual effects house, and then they closed that, and I ended up looking for a job, and I found a job in animation. They were looking for a compositor on a film called Shark Tale at DreamWorks. So I ended up on one show at DreamWorks, and I was going to be let go from the studio, actually, and I moved into lighting instead. So from lighting, I worked on a number of their films and then ended up as a visual effects supervisor currently.
Great, thank you, Marc. Latoya, it's your turn.
Me. All right. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for cyberly coming out here. I am a director currently working on The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder over at Disney TVA, which has been just like mind-bogglingly surreal for me because I grew up on the original Proud Family. So I'm just like, oh my God, how is this real all the time? But right before this, I'm kind of a switch hitter. I come from both writing and drawing. So right before this, I was over at Glen Keane Productions working on some development writing with those guys. And I've done some screenwriting for this Netflix preschool show called Super Monsters. And I'm currently doing some also like very minimal screenwriting for a Disney Junior show as well. But yeah, my journey into this industry has been kind of a meandering one. I initially came out here not necessarily knowing animation was a job. I just loved it. I loved it, but I knew I wanted to draw and I knew I wanted to write. I didn't know what that was in terms of a job. So I was like, I'm going to study creative writing and also fine arts and hope that somehow becomes a job. And so I went to UCLA and like I found the animation workshop while I was an undergrad there because they had a class that was titled Writing for Animation, but it was a storyboard class. And so like I went there with 3 English majors and they were like, goodbye. And then it was just by myself. And I'm like, oh, I could maybe draw. And it somehow ended me down this path into storyboarding and now directing. But yeah, so it has been a very, I feel like everybody has their own kind of weird path into this. And you were saying before, some of you guys, that like, you never really know when you're gonna get a job. Like my first job was not even in the drawing component, it was in production. And I kind of fell into this eventually, but yeah, it's been so gratifying. I'm just so happy to get to be on this panel with you guys.
Thank you, Latoya. And now, last but definitely not least, we have Emily Wallace.
Hello. I always forget to introduce my name when I start, but this time I remember. Oh, shit. Can you hear me?
Fair, it's low. It's quiet.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Can you hear me now?
Nope.
God, I'm sorry.
Emily's trying to work out her her problems with.
Elsa, why don't I talk about how I got into the industry?
Yeah, Jeanette, why don't you while we're waiting for Emily?
When I was in college, I started off in engineering and ended up with a sculpture degree. So I was there for a really long time. And I was doing comics while I was in college. And an animation studio opened in Austin. And they didn't really have it was before there were schools everywhere. So they didn't have a pool of people to draw from. And they said, hey, you can draw, we'll train you. So my first job was on the original Space Jam. And I learned quite a bit. And, you know, like animation, it's good if you have that spatial thinking ability where you can rotate things in your brain, you know, and I had that because I was an engineer. And after a while of being in Austin and learning all I could, it was time to move to LA. And we landed at a really good time. My husband is also in the industry, and my first job here was on Futurama. And I learned quite a bit with that. And I've worked on a ton of primetime shows from there, like Simpsons, Cleveland Show, American Dad, God, a ton of shows. So it's been really fun, and I feel very lucky. And it was a circuitous route to get here. And like Paula, I didn't start until I was almost 30. You know, I like played around in Austin for quite a while before unlike Jorge and Marc, I did not like work super hard to get here. And then when I finally found it, I was like, oh, I guess I should work hard if I want to stay here, you know? So anyway, that's my story. Emily, are you good to go? Can't hear you.
I'm gonna switch to my computer. I'm like, everything that could go wrong is going wrong.
Okay.
No problem. Emily, why don't we start on the questions, and then when Emily is back in, we'll have her jump on and introduce herself. Sounds good?
Sounds good. All right, so we're starting with a few questions ahead of time, just so that our attendees know what our plan is. We're gonna go through a few questions for about, a few, 45 minutes or so. And then we're gonna, a lot of you are posting questions on here. We're gonna try to answer some of the live questions after that. But first we're gonna kind of go through these questions. And instead of the panelists, I know we spoke about this before, each of you don't have to answer each question. We have it kind of pre-selected and we'll go from there. So, because otherwise we would be here all night. Not that I would love to spend the whole night with you, of course, but all right. So the first question is, what do you look for in a portfolio and the best platform for a portfolio? And I'm gonna, what I would like is, I'm gonna ask Latoya, Steven, Silver, and Roger, and try to not talk over each other too much, but I would like for there to be a back and forth between all three of you, if that's okay. So that's the big question. Everybody wants to know what they should have in their portfolio and the best platform for a portfolio.
I think that I personally think that one of the best things you can do for a portfolio is really, especially coming into animation, not just coming in with a generalist mindset, but having a specific goal. Like you love character design, you want to be a character designer, you want to be a storyboard artist, background artist, just be the expert. You'll see oftentimes they're always looking for, the studios are looking for specific job roles. They're saying, hey, we need a background designer, a character designer. They want to see that. And if you're all over the place, try not to do that. Try to organize your portfolio, not like a menu at a restaurant. I see a lot of portfolios that have character design background, storyboards background, prop background, character, and it's all over the place. Could you imagine having salad mixed with the meats, mixed with the desserts at a restaurant? You'd go crazy. You got to have some organization to it. And that's one suggestion I would make.
Yeah, I completely agree with Stephen. I think that for my case, since I'm primarily always looking at storyboards, I like when somebody applies that the first thing I see when they open their page is either storyboards or like layout, something that starts introducing the idea of like, okay, so this is how they would set up a shot, and they have cinematography kind of sensibilities. As far as the like nitty gritty of what I look for in storyboards themselves, I like to see pretty much these three things: that the people have a clear sense of like setting up a shot so that it can show you what's most important for the story point, that the character acting is suiting what they're trying to get across, and that they're utilizing all of the elements in the frame so that there's not dead air or static people, to show that like they know how to deal with, say, like 4 people in a scene wherein only 2 are talking. And like that is something that like I keep in mind a lot when I look at like storyboards from people that I've not worked with before.
I would say, since I'm in design, from a design point of view, realize that you're going to be having your portfolio next to a lot of other people applying for the same job. So if we take it for granted that you're good and you have the necessary skills to do the job, which is what we're looking for, like a very specific role we're trying to fill, if you have the skill to do that, then if a lot of you have similar assignments, like everyone did the same type of character design assignment, or if they did a silhouette assignment, beyond that, I think I usually look for a unique voice, like, because you're not just being paid to be, part of the job is paid to do a specific task. The other part of the job is you're being paid to be a designer. Like, we want to see what you're going to contribute to the show. Like, do you make a character that is funny? If it's a comedy show, can you make a character that makes us think of someone? Because we want you to contribute your voice and to know that you're going to be adding or plussing something to the crew if you're getting hired. So I think that's important. And the other thing I would say is, as far as platform, I would have multiple platforms these days. Like, don't just have one thing. You need to be as visible as possible in order to get a job. People need to know you're out there, meaning you probably want a website and an Instagram and like multiple ways of sending stuff to people, and just make it easy for people to know that you're around and that they can easily look you up if they're considering you for a job. So.
And I think it's also too very important just to be versatile. Remember, when you're submitting your portfolio, is this a primetime animated series? Is this a preschool animated show? What is it? So when you're first showing your work, your portfolio is your diploma. Your portfolio represents you. You can't be there to defend yourself and say, oh, I meant to do this and that. I don't know what happened in some of the schools somewhere where everyone started saying, just do a themed portfolio. And it just became one theme, and it was a lineup of characters, then all the props and the backgrounds, and everything was matching. Like, okay, you can unify a show, but that doesn't show me that maybe, can you do straight against curve? Can you go really flat and graphic? Can you go a little bit more action adventure? That way, if you really want to have a better chance amongst your peers, I say, as a designer in character design, especially for TV, be versatile.
Yeah, the same kind of does go for boards. And I mean, like, it depends. Like, say, for example, if you're like, I want to be on Voltron, like, and your boards are like all anime and action, it's like, yeah, okay, I think this person wants to be like, so like, but if you wanted to be on, like, say, Proud Family, and your boards are only showing like a very actiony fight sequences, I'm like, this is great, but like, can they do comedy? So make sure that, like, if you're gonna apply for a particular job, if you know what the job is, try to make sure you have things in your portfolio that show that you have sensibilities that could go in that direction, but even more than that, honestly, I like seeing versatility too, because sometimes, like, for example, I'm working with this one board artist who does kind of come from this more live action-y background. And so she had stuff in her portfolio, which was like, okay, this is cartoony and stuff. But then she had like this one board in her portfolio that was like, ooh, this is kind of interesting. And like these shot choices aren't like anything I've seen or like I usually see. And so like when we're looking at stuff, you start to kind of picture how you might be able to use other aspects of someone's skill sets. It's like, okay, yeah, you can do comedy acting, but that staging is really interesting. Let's see what we can do with that.
And I want to add one thing. The Guild they participated in a portfolio day at USC. And so we saw like a few people, and a lot of the people would come up with a specific thing in mind that they wanted to do. Like one woman wanted to be she wanted to be a character designer, but then everything in her portfolio, you could tell that she was a natural board artist, and I'm a storyboard artist. And I was like, not to discourage her from going into character design, but I was like, you need to play to your strengths, you know? And then I met someone who was the opposite. They wanted to be a board artist, but their design skills and their environmental design skills were amazing. And so I think it's good to have other people look at your board, because it's really hard to see what you are doing, you know? And also I think when you're a student or when you're young, you have an idea of what the job is going to be like, but you don't really know until you're there, right? You're kind of guessing until you get there. So there have been plenty of people that have shifted around. Like Latoya, you've shifted jobs, you know, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's funny because it's like, well, on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, have a portfolio that is specialized for what you're applying for. I honestly, like, I get it. Most people coming out of art school are coming from a generalist background where you're like, I painted the background and edited it and animated it. Like, you've done the entire production pipeline. So I can get how, like, now pick a job is like the hardest question. So just like try to pick a general direction to go in. And if once you get there, you're like, just kidding, background design's not for me. I like boards. Like, that's fine. Like, we've all kind of moved around.
It's true. It's true.
I'm just going to interrupt before we move on to the next question. Emily, I see you're back on, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Moment of truth, does it work?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your patience, everyone. My name is Emily. I work as a designer in animation. Some of the projects I work on are Steven Universe, OKKO, Monsters at Work, and I'm currently at Titmouse working on an unannounced show. And I've hopped around. I've done BG Paint, BG Layout, props. Like, if there's a design like job, I've probably done it at this point because I like to jump around and try new things. But I graduated from RISD with an illustration degree. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I ended up in animation purely by chance. And now I'm here, like almost 10 years later, and I'm very happy where I am. So onwards.
Yay. All right, thank you, Emily. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next question so we can continue forward. Thank you guys for your answers. So this is gonna be directed again at Latoya and at Jorge. And so since you guys are more, you're more like supervisors and directors and pretty high up, what do you guys look for in a reel, and how often should reels be updated?
When I look at reels, I love to see the super shortest version of a reel because and it's easy to click because that attention spans are tiny and you are competing with a lot of people. So put in your best shot first and then your even better shot last. And honestly, I recommend stay within a minute if you're an animator, because in a minute, people will know. And if you want to do comedy, put in all your comedy stuff. Like, the best advice I ever got was, don't put anything in your reel or your portfolio that you didn't enjoy. Because if you get hired to do that, you're going to be miserable. Put the things you love to do. And eventually, someone will hire you to do the things you do already. So for animation, I always say, put the stuff you like to do. If you'd like to do action, put all your action stuff. I think when employers look at stuff, I think we can tell when you like stuff. And there's nothing better than hiring someone who already likes to do a thing, and now you're paying them to do that thing. So, you know, and the way I recruit now is online. I just look at Twitter and I look at Instagram, and pretty much I hire people going, hey, I'm making a Mesoamerican thing. Who's doing Mesoamerican stuff for fun? That's what I'm going to hire. And there's no way for anybody to know what, you know, directors and creators are making. But if you put it out there, they will find you. So anyways, Latoya, sorry I jumped in.
No, I'm so glad you jumped in, because it was like, Jorge, take the wheel. And I'm like, oh, he's taking the wheel, thank God. I'm like, I'm right there with you. Like, the shorter, the better. That first shot should be like the money shot. You're like, yes, that. And same, like, there's something about when someone draws something and it has a lot of heart and a lot of passion in it, like, you feel it when you watch it. You feel like the exuberance in that, like, wow, this person loved doing it. And I look for that. I'm like, I second everything you said. And also, feel free to kind of just share things. Like, a lot of times recently, Instagram has become my like secret stash of storyboard artists, where I'm like just looking at things my friends are sharing, and I'm like, who's this guy? Where's he working? Is he working? Like, so like, just post the things you're excited about, and like, make the work you would want to make, because chances are someone is looking for someone to make that work.
And we're in the golden era of you don't have to live in LA.
Yes.
Thanks to the situation at hand, we are hiring people from all over the place, anywhere. So now it really does come down to the work, as opposed to.
On that point, we're really hoping to expand our scope as far as a union, so that if you are in another outside, because right now we're mostly in LA County, and hopefully, you know, if through the union, you'll be able to have some of your benefits and protections that way. Anyway, just wanted to throw that in there. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay. Any more about that? I think I'm going to go. Oh, how often should they update their reels?
I would say for me, it doesn't have to be like frequently updated. Like for my own work, I update every time there's like a marked change. Or if I do something, I'm like, okay, this is kind of different from the things we were doing before. I should probably add that in there. But like, you're only going to ever become stronger and stronger. So if I see someone's reel and it's like, that was from a year ago and it blows my mind, like, they're going to be monsters now. Like, so yeah, it's update as frequently as you feel you need to show where you are currently.
Yeah, there's nothing sadder than like, it's all stuff from 2 years ago. That's never a good time.
Yeah.
Like, you want to, you know, this is fruit. You want to put the fresh fruit.
I think it's good to try to stay productive personally. You know, it just keeps you stimulated and thinking. Hey, Marc, coming from your perspective, what do you look for in a reel?
It's interesting. So I think we did something like 125 interviews in 2018. Wow. It was a crazy hiring year, and we just looked at a ton of reels. There's a couple things I can think of. One is a variety of work. So you want a large variety of work. Don't show the same work over and over and over again. There are some times where we'll get into you know, a reel and it'll be the same shot over and over again, essentially. The same technique also, the same type of film or the same type of effect. We'll see a lot of that. So it's just basically repetitive all the way through. You want to show a variety of things. You know, oftentimes you'll want to put your newer stuff up front and your older stuff in the back. That's another idea. You know, we don't listen to music. Everybody watches reels with the sound down. I spent like hours editing my first reel thinking like, oh, cool. If I put Collective Soul on this reel, is it going to really make it? Is this going to sell? You know, what if I put Rush? Is that too edgy? We don't listen to any of the music, but that's more anecdotal. So yeah, I would just say, you know, make sure that you have a variety of shots, put stuff on there that you love, put stuff recent first, and then the other stuff, you know, it's, and try to keep it shorter. I totally agree. You know, a shorter reel I think is better.
Great, thank you so much, Marc. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next question. And this is gonna be directed at Paula Spence and Emily Wallace. And it's about testing. So you know, a lot of times when you're brand new into trying to find a job, sometimes you can be hired off of work that you have existing, but usually they're testing, and we don't love testing. You know, we kind of think it's unpaid work, but in our contract, we do allow for reasonable testing. So anyway, Emily and Paula, do you have anything to say about testing?
Yes, I do. Emily, do you mind if I go first and then you can follow up?
Mine is more just emotional support for anyone testing. So please go ahead.
Okay, that'll be a good follow-up to what I'm going to say. First of all, I want to reiterate what Jeanette said. The Animation Guild, we do our best to advocate for and protect our members, and that includes encouraging our members who are in the position to hire to do so without testing. You know, we would like our artists, our members to hire for their shows using portfolios, or, you know, Jorge and Latoya were talking about Instagram and Twitter. Like, go for that person that you can see the passion in, and then let's go from there. Like, take it from there. Okay, so having said that, we do encourage hiring without testing, but testing has been around for ages, since the animation industry has been around, and it used to be horrible. They would have people come in and work for a day or work for 2 weeks, you know, before they would get paid or hired. So that sucks. You probably will have to take a test or 2 or 20 when you're trying to break in. It's actually a good way for a young worker who doesn't have a professional portfolio yet to get a break. You know, if you can get a test by writing a good cover letter and saying, if you don't see what I try, by doing that, you can actually build your portfolio with professional looking work. You know, because you're doing a sequence of storyboarding. That is pulling on my strings on my jacket, sorry. Testing's different on every show. It's different at every studio. So you might get a great test that's under control. It's a character design test, and they ask you to do a turn and some expressions, and you're done. That's rare.
Oh, Paula.
Often you'll get a test that looks pretty overwhelming. Can you not hear me, Jeanette?
You just froze for a little bit. You're
Okay.
good now.
Sorry. The first thing you should do if you get a test is evaluate how long it's going to take you to do it. And I would encourage you not to get into doing a test that's going to take more than a day. I like to keep it shorter. But if it gets to be work that's like a week's worth, it's too much. It's too much. Don't spend that much time. You need to ask questions like, hey, this looks like a big test. That's okay. Also, you can get in touch with a testing committee at the Animation Guild if you have questions. You can find that email on the website, or maybe Alexi or somebody will put it in the chat. So as you gain experience, I think you'll probably have to take fewer tests. I haven't had to take one in a long time, but I actually was asked earlier this year how I feel about testing. As an art director, I'm like, how are you even going to test me? I encouraged them to offer a freelance assignment, and they did. So you can always advocate for yourself like that by asking questions. We actually have some info on the website from our testing committee here at the Guild, and it's a really good resource. I'll go look for it and put it in the chat. Emily, sorry to take up all the time. You go.
It's good. Talking is hard, so I appreciate
Nothing.
you filling in the facts here.
So did you have to take any test, Emily, when you were?
Yes. So my first 2 jobs, I was asked to test. However, my most recent 2 jobs, I have not tested. My portfolio was enough to get me a job. But I guess Paula as an art director has a lot more experience from, I think, speaking to the testing process. But as far as the emotional effects of testing, I can speak a little bit to that. So after I graduated, I went about 9 months without being able to get a job. And I say this only because, like, solidarity, guys, like, it's normal. Like, if you're testing and, like, it's really frustrating not to hear back. And, like, I've been there, and, like, I just want to let you know that it's not uncommon. Like, it doesn't mean you're terrible at drawing. It doesn't mean, like, you don't have anything important to say. But one of the things that I realize now, whenever my friends are like, hey, do you know anyone who is available for this job, is the reality is a lot of times, even if you're the best artist, like, you might not be the right fit. Like, and that's okay. Like, there's so many productions happening at any given moment, and it can be really discouraging, but I can guarantee you most of the time, like, it's just like, you're good, your art is good. It's just that, like, I don't know, like, you just weren't the right fit, you know? Like, if you like, you know, Mecha or, like, Transformers, and, like, you're applying for, like, a show that has nothing to do with that, like, that's okay. Like, you want the job, and I 100% understand, but it's kind of about finding that fit, and it's all about timing, and it's all about kind of being in the right place at the right time. So
yeah, timing is really important because our production schedules are so short that usually that hiring window goes by in a flash, you know? So try not to get discouraged. Sometimes because I've done my fair share of tests, the thing that would get me through was just kind of, I felt like I was auditioning the production, you know? Because there have been times that I've been handed a test and I was like, hell no, I'm not working on that show, you know, because I was like, nuh-uh, not a good fit for me. But then, you know, but then at the same time, you're kind of, it's also good practice. You can kind of see how they're putting the show together. And so there is some benefit to that. But definitely do not kill yourself on a test. It has to be, it shouldn't be a horrible experience, you know? Anyway, anything else to add, Paula? Go ahead.
Some tests are paid. You should definitely ask questions if you're offered a test, such as, is it paid? Or I'm very busy at my full-time job. Do I need to do this entire test? How about if I do a partial? If you have a question, ask them. They usually include a prompt to ask questions if you have any, and don't be afraid to do so.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next thing. And this is actually, Paula, this will include you, and I guess we can all speak to it. What's the difference between union and non-union studios? I'll go ahead and start with that.
Yeah.
A union studio has signed a contract with the Animation Guild, and there are basic minimum, like wage minimums and benefits, and that they're required by contract to adhere to. If you're at a non-union studio, they pay you whatever you agree to be paid. So, you know, a job that normally pays, you know, close to $2,000 a week, if you're at a non-union studio, depending on where you're at in the country, you can get paid like a lot less than that. So if you live in a high cost area like Los Angeles, $2,000 a week is kind of what you need, you know, around to live, you know. But if you're in you know, Atlanta, I think their cost of living is a little bit lower. Austin is probably comparable to what it costs in Los Angeles to live. And I know Vancouver is a really expensive area, and Toronto. So, you know, anyway, so we have these minimums. Non-union studios can basically not give you any benefits, and you're kind of at their mercy, especially if they're the only studio in town. Anyway, Paula, you have anything to say on that?
I was going to say all of that. You happen to have mentioned Vancouver. I know some people that work there, and some people that work there are making about half of what our contracts stipulate. one half that is shocking. And then I have a friend who works here now, but he was working in New York when he started. Same thing. He was making about half of what a storyboard artist makes out here with the Animation Guild.
And New York
So
is even
check
more
out those
expensive.
wages. Yeah, it was. I couldn't believe it when I learned that.
Well, also,
and was like,
also, like if a contract is signed in a low cost area, it's not like that studio automatically has to pay Los Angeles rates. It's a sliding scale according to the area. So one of the questions that had come up, even though I was going to wait till the end, was that how would the wages that we have on our contract on our website compare for other places? It would be if we were to sign a contract in these other places, it wouldn't be like an automatic 50% jump. It would be a sliding adjustment to the area, to the cost of living in that area.
yeah, it would be what we could bargain, for that
Right.
area.
Right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and
my mind just went blank.
I'm going to go ahead and move on to.
Okay.
Paula, do you have one more point, or I feel like I don't want to.
Well, I was just gonna say very clearly that we get healthcare, dental, vision, behavioral health. We have 2 pension plans. We have an optional 401k, and we have great programs like this for members. And you can have a career that will lead to retirement in dignity.
Right.
That's it.
Right. That's what we all want. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question. Okay, this is to Steven Silver and Jorge. What's the best way to boost my social media presence? And I'm glad it's directed to you guys because I don't know anything about that.
Steven, you want to go first? I feel like you were one of the first artists that kind of mastered social media.
Well, thanks. I think the most important thing to do is what I've learned is not get so stressed out about it and not just feel like, oh, people are saying post 4 times a day, 5 times a day, to trying to keep up with that. I think especially when like Inktober comes around, people get so frantic and everyone's posting and they stress themselves out and they go crazy. I think it's absolutely just very important just in general, just post what you're comfortable with. And we've been talking about it here too. Just post what it is that what you love, that you kind of want to share, that you want to express, because that's what people want to see. Pay attention to what other people are posting and sharing. I found very early on when I was doing social media in the beginning that I found what people reacted to the most was process. They like to see the underlying process of something. It wasn't always about showing that, ta-da, here's the finished thing, but showing something that had some form of teaching aspect. That's always got eyeballs looking at things, but absolutely having social media, posting, sharing is going to be essential. Just don't stress yourself out. Again, I know studios hire. We've talked about it, hire based off of your social media. I was talking to some friends at Titmouse. They said they hire a lot of their animators off of Vimeo and YouTube. They see their videos, they see their passion projects there. But just, I would say, don't neglect it, but also don't worry about the likes. That's the bottom line. Just don't worry about the likes. It's not a reflection that you're a bad artist if you have 1,000 friends and only 10 people like your drawing. It's just, don't let that be a discouraging factor. Just post when you love things and do it because that's what you want to do.
Okay, I'll be the bummer. I think the big warning that I give people is, if we live in very cynical times, so it's very easy to be negative online. So if you talk trash about an animated movie or an animated TV show, that's a tattoo you're leaving up there, and people on those crews read that stuff. So if you are planting those seeds of online hate, it will come back to haunt you. So we're all in the same industry. We're all professionals. People will Google you when you apply for a job, and they will read whatever you wrote on Twitter, whatever you wrote on Facebook. All it takes is one horrible thing to say, and it will haunt you. So just be very, very, very careful. We're living in a time where I think people aren't putting up with that stuff anymore, and thankfully so. So I just think we're in a very, very good time for awful people to reveal themselves online. Terrible advice, by the way. You know, but I will say, at least for me, it's been, I try to post positive things as much as I can. If I love something, I immediately talk about it. If something inspires me, I try to talk about it. If I don't like something, I keep my mouth shut. If I do not agree with the way a thing was handled in a narrative or in a movie, I'm not going to get anything from just putting that stuff out there. So I try to encourage people to stay positive. And then the other big one that I've done, and I think it works, is all you know. Obviously, everybody has some free time. Put all the stuff that you love up there, and you'll find people that like it. You start creating relationships and friendships and support for certain themes and certain things that you're into. And there's nothing quite like that online community to support you. And then when people are looking for other people to hire or jobs open up, you know, if someone draws Mexican wrestlers all the time and I all of a sudden have a Mexican wrestling show, guess where I'm looking? I'm going to type hashtag Mexican wrestlers. And if I see artists drawing Mexican wrestlers that are really into it, I'm probably going to hire them. So again, put all the stuff you already love online. And to me, that is the best calling card. When people can see your, I think Paula said it, people can see your passion in there. So I think online it's a double-edged sword. So you have to master it. I think my wife has no website, no Twitter, no nothing. And it's kind of ridiculous to me that she has decided to do that. I personally feel like I can't afford to do that. I need to have a social presence. But I you know, again, a warning as you guys who are starting out, just be careful what you say and know that if you insult you know, a movie, more than likely people who worked on that movie will see those comments and it will affect your future. So not to put the fear of the gods into you, but the fear of the gods into you.
But be afraid, yeah.
Be afraid. Responsibility.
I'd also just add, just again, consistency. It's like pick a lane sort of thing. It's like, what do you love? What do you want to show? Because then, like, if someone does hashtag, all of a sudden they found that you love drawing horses or Mexican wrestlers or something else, you're consistent. That can be helpful too. So try not to be that menu that's showing your artwork, but then what you ate for dinner last night. And then you show this, and then, you know, just try to keep it clean, and find your voice.
Yeah, there was a question that had come up about hashtags. There is no rule really. Like if you're just consider whose attention you're trying to get. You know, I think that, you know, just put everything on there. Anyway, okay, I'm going to move on to the next question because, man, this is a fun conversation and we are eating up our time. We're definitely going over. But I love hearing from all of you. Okay, so the next question is to Mairghread and Emily and Roger, and it's like, what are some things you wish you knew when you were trying to get into the industry?
Okay, the best piece of advice I ever got when I was trying to get into the industry is kind of mean, but I guarantee you it really helped me, which is you are not important enough to lie to. As a writer trying to break into animation, I interviewed all the time and I'd hear like, well, you're good, but it didn't quite work here or it didn't quite work there. Tell me another idea. Pitch me again. Do you have any more pitches? And I'd be like, oh no, they hate me. They're just being polite. And it's like, no, it really is. There's so many factors that go into getting on a show, getting in front of the right person, getting an idea picked up that you have no control over. So if someone says, I don't like this idea, but what else do you have? Or I'd love to see something else, or I'd love to see more of your work. My God, like show it to them. People can't help you if they don't know where you want to go or what you want to do. So, you know, especially like, because I guess that was the other thing that really sort of always bugged me was when I started interviewing for assistant jobs, I had this weird feeling like I had to pretend like I wanted to be an assistant for the rest of my life. You know, they'd be like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I'd be like, oh, at this job, clearly, like doing whatever, getting your coffee. That's my highest regard. But I actually ended up getting most of my jobs from people I met at my first job that didn't go anywhere because they knew I wanted to be a writer. And I told them I wanted to be a writer, and I kept showing them I wanted to be a writer. And I tried to tell the whole show, you know, this is where I want to go. And eventually those people got to places that had openings for me. So that combination of both sort of being honest with what you want and that being okay, and also just assume that people are being honest with you, was really crucial to getting me sort of going in the business.
Okay. Emily or Roger, you guys have anything to add? No?
Oh, Roger, go ahead.
I would say, well, two things. One would be that I get there's a lot of frustration looking for a job. And being on the other side of it, having worked in the studios for a while, like there's a whole side that you don't see when you're applying. And a lot of it has nothing to do with you. A lot of it has to do with like technical things, like the specifics of the job, of who's up for it. And it's not a reflection of you most of the time. A lot of it is it just happens to turn out that way. And it's hard to balance that when you're getting rejections all the time and you're comparing yourself to like your friends, and they might get jobs and you're not, and you don't know why. But a lot of it really just has to do with like things that you're never going to know about. And the other thing I would say is networking is important. But I know when I was nervous about getting into the industry, like everyone calls it like schmoozing, like it's a very negative thing. Like they're like, oh, I don't like that. You know, I'm just an artist. I don't like to schmooze. But it's really, you know, like it is a job. And I don't think you should think of it that way, because part of us evaluating artists, one, we want good artists. But the other thing is you're a part of a team. And part of our evaluation, if you get to an interview stage, is this a functional person that we can, you know, like work with and communicate with? Are they going to be a problem because they're going to have a lot of hangups on something? Or should we go with someone who's not quite as good, but is a better team player with the rest of us? So just think of it that way, that, you know, it's just, we want to work with someone who's good. We also want to work with someone who we enjoy working with. So, and that's just human nature. That's what I would say.
All right, we should kind of move along. Is that okay, Emily, or do you have something to, okay. Because we are running out of time. Latoya, what did you learn in your first job?
Oh, so my first job was not an art position. I kind of came from a generalist program, and like I hustled, and I knew I wanted to be in animation in some capacity, but I didn't necessarily know what that was. So I was like, oh, here are some backgrounds and boards, and like I just, in retrospect, was like waiting aggressively in place. Eventually I did get a PA position, and to be honest, that was like the best vantage point, because I just, like, you don't really know what it's like in a studio. You have like this vague concept of what all these positions are, but until you are in a studio, when you're seeing like, oh, this is what each of these roles actually are. And like, once I was inside, first of all, as a PA, you see, like, you're just like a fly on the wall for every conversation. So it's like, you hear what directors want from board artists and what the art director wish had happened in design. And so it's like, I started to kind of get a sense for how a pipeline needed to move, and like the things a board artist would do that would then create problem for design, that would then create problems in shipping. And so it afforded me two things. One, I learned what boarding looked like in a professional capacity. But two, it also made me appreciate how what you do in your one limited little microcosm as an artist affects everybody else. And it's something I've noticed as I go forward in my career, is a lot of times artists who start off just in the art position, they're doing things, but they're not thinking of the whole. So even if your first job is not like a more generalist thing, it's something I would really encourage, is like always try to learn how your jobs connect into, like, get the rocket into space as a whole. Because the things you do as like a board artist, like say you do a gag and like there's a new design, that has like a butterfly effect down the pipeline. And it's something like I start to really appreciate it in my artists now. But yeah, my first job was, it was actually a really good PA-ship. I think the other thing I would recommend is if you are an aspiring artist and you are like, I don't know, maybe your portfolio is not there. It's okay to apply for like production entry-level positions. What I would say is just be abundantly clear that you're like, I want to go down this other path. Like, I'm going to work my ass off as a PA or as a coordinator, but this is where I want to go. Especially nowadays, a lot of, I mean, like, we all get it. Everybody kind of has their own trajectory. And I really appreciate when people are upfront about what their ultimate like goals are. So you don't have to feel like you're keeping it a secret from people, like, I'm secretly an artist and they can never know. Like, it actually really helps us. Cause like, for example, there's a PA on Proud Family who, like, I know she wants to be a designer, and I'm keeping that in mind as I'm kind of watching the production progress, and I'm kind of keeping it in mind as like, oh, there's little opportunities where it's like, oh, we might actually be able to like give you a freelance design or something like that. You start to kind of transition in your capacity, and it can only benefit you to kind of be very upfront and focused in where you want to go.
Can I just jump in and piggyback off that, just to say that any writer who gets a shot at working in production, even as a writer's assistant or as a PA or as a script coordinator or whatever, I love that too. There's a huge influx right now of writers who have no experience with the pipeline, and they give you unproducible scripts, and it's just a huge nightmare. So learning, even when you're not an artist, what artists need from a good script and being able to see that just makes everyone's life easier.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. Mark, do you have anything to add to that? What did you learn on your
I do. I overthought this question, actually. I tried to prepare for it. So I'm going to shotgun a bunch of stuff out there. And what's funny is the first and number one most important thing I thought I was going to mention was exactly what Latoya said. And I just want to riff off of that a bit. One of the most important things that I learned in my career was there is no one at the studio who is looking out for your career path. That is entirely up to you. There's nobody advocating for your career path. There's nobody who understands where you're going or where you're headed. That is entirely up to you. And when I ended up at the studio, I thought, okay, well, I have a meeting each, year with HR, and I get a new contract, and I tell them, well, I want to be a compositor, I want to be a sequence lead, and I want to do this, and I want to direct. And they go, great, here, sign here. And so that information doesn't get out anywhere. There are many times that I got passed up an opportunity, and the feedback I would hear later is, well, we didn't know that you wanted to do that. So there is no one at the studio whose job it is to understand where you're headed. Now, I'm not saying you start the studio first day and you go, hey, how you doing? I'm Mark. I'm going to be a director someday. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is let people know eventually what you want to do and advocate for that. One thing what was that?
Get the job first.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Get the job first.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you consider your job as your starting point. You want to make yourself useful beyond your job. That's the way you avoid layoffs. When you started a company, find out the thing that's broken or find out a process and own it. Document it. Make sure that everybody knows you're the guy. Take that on. Take ownership of the company. What you're doing is showing value beyond your position at the company. When layoffs happen, downsizing happens, they have to make decisions. You are a person of value beyond your position. So I would say definitely try to do that. Be kind to your coworkers, by the way, because they're going to end up your bosses. You can't control that, or you're going to end up their boss. And it is hard to accrue reputation and respect after you have had a certain relationship with someone. So just pay attention to that. Mm-hmm. Work on the projects that nobody else wants to work on, because at the end of the day, there's huge opportunities there. I have gotten so many bumps or elevations in my career because I took on the one project that nobody else wanted to work on, and they were happy to have me on it. Learn to embrace the projects that are terrible that you work on. You have no control over the films you work on. I get more enjoyment out of the films that I've worked on that were absolutely terrible. I worked on Titanic. I think I've worked Titanic twice, watched it twice, maybe watched it twice. I have seen Mortal Kombat 2 Annihilation like 3 times because it's just fun to sit down and watch. So embrace those terrible projects you work on. And the last thing I will say, this is the last bit of advice. I know I've run over here, and this is going to sound ridiculous. Learn to be able to speak comfortably in public. There's a number of reasons for that, but that was a huge career-changing opportunity for me. And learning to be able to talk in public, it happens. We're doing it right now, but there's a number of reasons. Number one, the number one phobia in America is public speaking. The number 2 phobia in America is death. So if you're able to be comfortable with doing that sort of thing, then you have a huge advantage over other people in a career path. The second reason, and the reason why this is even more important now than ever, is that when you are comfortable speaking in public and you're able to address people in a group, you can advocate for people who cannot do that or don't have a voice or aren't comfortable in doing that. So if you learn to do that, you're able to support and promote other people and their ideas. So I'm sorry, I know I ran way over time. I yield my time. Please move on.
All good, all good. Okay, Emily and Mark, back to you, Mark, about can I get a mentor to guide me?
Emily, go ahead.
Thank you. So I recently just took on my first mentee, which is very exciting. But I think I hear this question a lot in portfolio reviews. And I had this question when I was still a student. I think my biggest advice would be, don't send an email with, please look at my portfolio. And like, that's it, that's your email. Like, it's really helpful to, even if you have questions or if you're wondering about something, like, make it easy for me to answer your question. Like, the reality is that like a lot of artists are more than happy and willing to help you because they remember being in that situation. But the truth is that we're working like 9-to-5 jobs and we have lives and we want to help you too, but make it easy for us. Like, give us pointed questions being like, hey, this thing here is something I got criticized about, or like I had questions about, like, can you elaborate? And that kind of ongoing conversation is what leads to kind of the mentor and mentee kind of relationship. It's not always a formal like, hey, I'm applying for this official thing where you're my mentor and like you're gonna answer all my questions for me. Like, it's what a mentor and a mentee is really just like an ongoing conversation where you're learning from one another. And like, the questions I get asked, sometimes I don't know. And like, I have to like go ask someone else or like research it. And like, I learn along the way. But I also kind of remember what that was like being kind of on the other side. So Mark, take it away.
Oh, well, I think that's all good advice. And I had some of those points. I agree with all of them. The one thing I will also add is that you may want to consider having two different mentors or different mentors for different things. And the reason I say that is that when people get into the industry, and certainly it was the case for me, when I first got in, I thought all issues that I was going to run into were going to be technical issues. And it turns out there's 1,000,001 resources for technical issues. I can get on a forum right now and I can ask, how do I change the rotation value in Maya? Great. There's plenty of help with technical issues. The thing that most people run into, and most of the issues and conflicts that we have in the industry, actually come down to personnel issues, relationships with other artists, advancement in the company, and that sort of thing. So if you can find a mentor who can help you through, it's the soft skills, being able to deliver bad news, or being able to resolve conflict, or being able to address another artist with respect, but to give advice. That's the kind of mentor you're most likely going to need, because any issues you run into are most likely going to be personal conflict issues. They probably won't be technical. So try to find somebody who you respect in the workplace, who has the soft skills that are able to help you through that.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you don't, you can't, it's really hard to learn that in school. Like, you have to kind of be in it. Okay, I'm going to move on. Let's see, this is to Paula and Stephen. And what's the best way to, it kind of dovetails off of what we were talking about. What's the best way to reach out to an artist in the industry? And what are some do's and don'ts or email etiquette? So Emily even touched on one of those things, I guess.
Yeah, since, sorry, I'll just say this off of what Emily said. That was really good advice, to not send an email that says, will you look at my portfolio? I mean, you can do that if you already have a relationship with that person and they know that's coming, but I would say the best way to do it, and I know that Steven's going to have a social media take on this, so I'm going to let him talk more, but I like an email that is professional. Use your spell check. Introduce yourself. Include links so I can check out your website. If you have an ask, be very clear about it. If you do want me to look at your film or your portfolio, just come out with it and ask me, and make it easy for me to respond to your ask. If it is a film viewing request, that's fine. If you would like to spend some time with me, give me an option. Like, I'm going to be in the area of your studio on this day. Would it be possible to meet? And then I can just say yes or no. And if I say no, because I really am busy, I can give you another option. It makes it much easier for me to look at my schedule and go, this person's professional. I want to give them some time. Let's work it out. And then if you're given an opportunity by someone who invites you to email them, do it. Take up that gives you an opportunity, whether it's, you know, an offer to look at your film or your portfolio or whatever you need. If you get an opportunity, you need to follow and be polite and thankful, and that's it. And I want to say that the real advice that was keeping your reel to a minute or less is really good. Because when I get multiple requests to look at films that are 5 minutes or 10 minutes or, oh my God, 21 minutes, I can't do that. Stephen.
Okay, great. Stephen,
I'd just say, it's kind of been said, like Emily said it, Paula said it, just really have a question in mind. Just don't say, can you look at my portfolio, and just throw it out there. It's like, I'm looking to be a character designer. I'm curious as to what's needed in the character design portfolio. And most importantly, if anything, just take initiative. Everyone is online, and all your heroes, anyone that you want to learn from, has social media presence, and all it takes for you is to direct message them. Not saying that everyone's going to get back to you. They won't. You know, people have their lives, but what I would say is just try. See if you can maybe do it. I get people contacting me through Instagram and Facebook all the time, just with those questions, but they're doing it, and that's all I could say is just reach out.
Can I add to Jeanette? I love that advice, Stephen. And I would say, once you get into the studio, don't forget to keep doing that. Whether you're reaching out to people on social media or people you don't know, but get to know the people in your studio. Like Jeanette here is a natural mentor, and like looks out. Yes, she looks out for people, like especially the young people that don't know better than to work late without being paid, you know. So get to know the people in your studio, because it's a really good way to learn about their jobs, all the different jobs that are available. And you might, as Latoya said earlier, go, just kidding, backgrounds are not for me. I really like storyboarding. So it's a really great way to learn, and you can have many, many mentors and mentees when you're working at a studio or working on a show, just by remembering, you know, personal information about the people you work with and following up with them. Like, how's your cat? Or I remember you went on vacation last month. You never told me how it was. And just get to know people and personally.
All right, Paula, I'm going to move on to the next thing. Everybody has really awesome stuff to say. And so the next one is Marc and Jorge. It's like, what do you guys look for when you're interviewing a candidate? Do you interview candidates? I think I've normally it depended on the position for me. Like if I'm supervising, normally they would want to interview me, but when I've been in lower positions, I haven't been interviewed. So what about you guys? Do you interview people?
Marc, you want to go first?
No, go ahead, Jorge.
So I recently, it depends on the position, but and this sounds so horrible, but by the time they get to me, they've gone through like a gauntlet of other people. And then we have a system, which is not fair, but we have a system where we try to get other people from other productions to vouch for artists that we've never worked with, which is unfair to people coming out of school and people who don't have experience. But one of the main factors that I worry about, and I've always worried about, is, you know, are you crazy? is a thing that is super easy to hide, and so you have to ask the right questions, because people's work can be incredible, but they can be really hard to work with. And that, I'm almost scared whenever I see an incredible portfolio. I immediately, the red flag internally goes, wow, they must eat babies or something, because how can someone that good not have a job right now? So terrible, terrible way to think about things. But I will take someone who's good, who has really good attitude and seems like a positive force, over someone who's incredible, who's really negative and really hard to work with. So to me, at that point, it comes down to, if you're talented, that's kind of a given at this point. We are looking for a great attitude and someone who's going to be a positive part of the crew, because these are, you're creating little families, you're creating these little teams, and you really, really have to, when you hire someone, you want them to be a good part of the family. So to me, it becomes very personal. And even though it's a job, you are going to be living with these people through some pretty harsh, amazing times, but also difficult times. And you are kind of marrying people for a production. So thankfully, there's a lot of amazing people. But again, going back to what you do, if you're a jerk in school, people will remember you. If you're a jerk in your job, people will remember you. So, the seeds you plant, those will grow. Go for it, Marc.
I totally agree with what you said about like fitting in, and fitting in with the culture of the company and making sure that you're not going to upset people. It's even more important the smaller the company too. Like in a larger company, you can absorb some of that, but if you have a smaller company and there's only 3 people in it, in a division, then yeah, obviously that's going to be a big deal. I'll mention a couple of things, just interview specific. A lot of the times, what we're trying to measure, and this is kind of what Jorge was saying, we're trying to measure not just your technical skills, but maturity and composure. That's a big deal. Some questions are meant to just throw you off. They don't necessarily have a right or a wrong answer. So try to be composed and answer those questions. Just answer as honestly as you can. It's not necessarily about getting the right specific answer. Sometimes we're just trying to see how you respond to a situation. So the other thing I would say is take the time to answer the question correctly and don't worry about a time limit. I've watched so many people come in for an interview, get nervous, immediately answer a question after not thinking about it, and then send us an email afterwards and say, I know I got that wrong, but I knew it originally. I knew the idea. I knew what I was trying to say. So that's something that you should probably pay attention to. I will say, just in the terms of the actual interview process, there's 2 things I did want to mention. Number one, the future is remote, I think, from here on out. I just think that this is going to be the thing from this point forward. So, get a good webcam, get good audio, get good lighting. That's a huge advantage. If you can put that together in a remote interview, that actually makes a big deal. We've had to pass on candidates because we couldn't get their audio and the answers, to come through. That's a problem. And the last thing I will say is, when you're doing an interview, it's probably a good idea to practice. Record yourself, practice with friends, and just see what your inclination is when you're nervous. How do you respond? Do you speak really fast? Do you get really quiet? And then try to overcome those particular interview personality traits so that you're able to deliver what it is that you want to say. The last thing I'll say is, when you do actually figure out all your audio and video and all that stuff, get a friend and call them on multiple platforms, Zoom, Google, WebEx, or whatever, and see what your system is set up there, so that you make sure that you're able to come through. Those are very interview specific things, not necessarily about the candidate, but I just wanted to give that advice because all of us are going to be doing this remotely now for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think it'll be this way for a little while, and then probably a hybrid after, because there's some people that are kind of chomping at the bit to get back to the studio, but it'll probably be a blend, I think, hopefully. So based off of that question is, this is to the Scotts, even though you guys aren't married or anything, but, I lost my place. Oh, here it is. Margaret and Mark, what are some of the key qualities you look for in a potential employee colleague? We've kind of touched on this a little bit today.
Go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, so there are three things that I'm really looking for in a writer, which is I want someone who can produce work on time. I want someone who will take notes well, and I want someone who has clarity in their writing. A lot of animation writing is about, especially action animation writing, which is what I specialize in, is about controlling pacing, controlling geography of a fight, describing very succinctly what I'm seeing on, like, what am I seeing at any given moment? So to show you can do on time, if I'm talking to like a very young writer, I'm looking for someone who is producing material regularly. I don't know how long it took you to write that sample. So, but if I see that you do a podcast every month, or, you know, you are doing a lot of one-act plays. I did a lot of one-act plays when I came out to LA to be able to have something to talk about. I don't care if you're like, I post on my AO3 account every week on Thursday at midnight. Like, that shows me that you can hit a deadline, which is so important, because most animation writing, as a story editor, I have 48 hours or less from the time I get your script to the time I have to hand it into clients. So if you are a day late, you can literally not be hired ever again. Like, I've seen writers doing that. Your job is to make my life easier at the end of the day, not to write the world's best Optimus Prime moment. So you've really got to take the notes. And if you don't understand the note, talk to me, keep talking. You don't have to shut down, but I've seen writers, young writers, get passionate and get defensive and fight people like, no, this is a better, you don't know what else is going on. And at the end of the day, you're just starting out. Your value to me is that a senior writer is going to be more experienced than you and give me a better initial product. Your value is that you're going to tailor your work more to me than a senior writer. So you're going to do all the little punctuation things that you see in our samples. You're going to be ultra clear. You're going to nail our voices, you know, and anything you can do to be that team player and to be someone that I want to be able to recommend you for jobs years down the road. So anything you can do that shows me that you are in this for the long haul, that you are going to be writing for years down the road, and that you're going to be someone I want to work with for years down the road, is the best possible thing you can do.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly, in terms of that question about how to get a good mentor, being that person exactly that you're describing, being that person that is on top of it and willing to, you know, put in the effort, and somebody who's worthy of you mentoring. We're all busy in this industry. Everybody's busy, and they've all got, you know, their day job and their family, and they're trying to get back to. And if you're that person who can deliver on deadline and you show that potential, you're much more likely to be successful and have somebody take you under the wing for mentorship. Couple things I wanted to add. One, you know, obviously having somebody who's got integrity and maturity, going back to what Jorge said about, you know, having, you know, making sure that you can work with others without pissing people off is obviously a big deal. That's a given. Having friends and working with people outside of your department is important. It's easy to get, you know, this, you know, small unit of people who only work in your department. Broaden yourself, you know, get to know people in other departments. That gives you a full perspective of the whole process. The last thing I will say in terms of like the people I want as a employee or a colleague, I want to mention inclusion and diversity. It is very simple for us in the industry to just say, well, you know, it's not a diverse industry and studios need to hire more people. Actually, that's part of it. There's the hiring process of large corporations, which is one thing. But the bigger thing is the people that we work with, that we promote. When we're picking people for teams, when we're picking who we're going to sit with at lunch, when we pick friends and people we hang out with at work, including everybody making sure there's a diverse group that we hang out with and that we're promoting people within the workplace and giving everybody an opportunity. That's actually something we control. That's not in charge of the company. That's us individually making choices. So when you are looking for a team, when you're looking for people to work with, when you're even looking for people to sit down with, making sure that you're being inclusive and involving everybody that's up to us. That's super important.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Roger and Paula. And should I invest in setting up an at-home office since people are working remotely? What if I don't have the resources?
Roger, would you like to talk?
I'm going to say the reason why our business is still working right now is because we have the capability to do this. And I think just everyone having a system is going to be pretty standard if it wasn't already. But the benefit of that is that we've been doing it for a while. People were able to adapt quickly. So you don't actually need the best, newest technology. Like there used to just be one Cintiq and people asked whether you had it or not. But now there's more choices. There's different levels of Cintiq. There's even third-party, like, other manufacturers that are making drawing tablets. You don't have to get a Mac. Do the best you can is what I would say. Like you can get a PC, you could get a used PC, anything that's going to run what you need. The more important part to me, if you're a young person trying to get in, is that you know the software, because that's how we work now. Like that our jobs are specifically made a certain way. And when we want to hire people on a position for a certain show, they're going to have a pipeline. They're like, do you know Harmony? If you're an animator, do you know Storyboard Pro? Do you know, Photoshop, or the things that we're going to use, or whatever program that show needs? So making sure that not only you have the system, but you're familiar with how we do things is going to make it easier for you to get hired.
Mm-hmm.
I want to point out too that how it is to be in college, just getting to school, and if you don't have resources, Roger said something very smart, which is buy something used. There's plenty of people that are moving up to a professional setup that want to unload their old Cintiq or whatever. Oh boy, my computer's telling me my internet connection is unstable. I'm sorry if I sound robot. One other important to know is that our master agreement at the Animation Guild actually requires our employers to supply the equipment if we have to work at home. It's not all of our contracts, but our main one. And so most of the employers are supplying equipment if you don't have it. If you start a job and you don't have Cintiq and you need it, you can ask if you're working from home and they be able to supply what you need. So don't worry about that right now. Just try to get a job.
It's good to have your own personal little setup. Like it doesn't have to be anything really fancy so that you can get the job, because you will need some stuff in order to apply it.
You'll probably need it if you have to do a test.
Right.
So
but if you do get the job, the studio, if it's a union studio, and most of the non-union studios that are really professional big studios will do the same, they should set you up, because there's security issues, and they need to get their show or movie or whatever done, and they need you. Okay, I'm going to move on. Let's see. Aside from, this is for Jorge and Marc, aside from craft-specific software, what technology should I familiarize myself with if I'm trying to get a job in CG?
I'm going to jump in and say Blender. Blender is coming. It's free. It's free worldwide, and we are doing Maya and the 3 using Blender, and I'm shocked by how incredible it is. At the end of the day, I think knowing software is important, but what you do with the software, even more important. Take it away, Marc.
I totally agree. Yeah, people do get, I will say, actually, that reminds me of something. Do not become religious about software. I've watched people toast their career over support. As far back as Softimage versus Maya, I saw people who left companies and talked about getting out of the industry because they were so religiously dedicated to a particular piece of software. Software constantly changes. So yeah, you know, as Jorge was saying, like Blender, you know, that could take over. Now there will be people who say, well, I want Maya and Arnold and I'll never do anything else. Well, no, you should really get familiar. Even if you want to do Maya Arnold, still understand Blender. One thing I will mention is, aside from software, I think it's a really good idea for artists to understand the upstream and downstream deliverables from their position. So if you're in the middle of the pipeline, you want to understand what's coming into your department and what's going out. So many times artists just care about their department themselves and they don't really focus on the impact of their department on other departments. You can cause a potentially huge trouble down the road, or if you are getting inventory into your department and it's not the way you want, if you familiarize yourself with the upstream departments, you can actually communicate to them as far as what you need into your department. That way you're not, you know, you're not being impacted in your job. And that really doesn't have anything to do with software specific, that's just more workflow. The last thing I will say is, understand the workflow of a company. When you come into it, there's going to be a lot of unique things about that studio. Learn to understand what's going on unique to that studio. Oftentimes people will come in, maybe they're very experienced in another studio, they come in and then they start making recommendations left and right. And it's always best to understand the studio process first and then make recommendations later. There's nothing worse than somebody coming in and just spouting off a bunch of high budget films and saying, well, on Avatar, we did it this way. And you're like, well, that's not how we do it here. So first you got to learn the process of the studio and then move forward from that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mairghread and Latoya, this is a writing question. As a writer, how do you pitch stories to animation studios or teams?
Mairghread, take it away. Throwing you directly at this one.
Yeah, right? Don't be surprised if you don't pitch for a while. It's some shows, especially shows that are interlocking, especially shows that have a lot of continuity or are binged, it's very common for you to get a springboard or even a beat sheet that you had no input in that you're just told to execute. You know, that can happen. So don't be freaked out by that. In terms of if you are asked to pitch, they will always pick the idea you have least prepared. So make sure they will do, right? They always do it.
So one sentence at the end.
Yeah, make sure you have an idea. I need the beginning, the middle, and the end. Give me the whole structure. Don't be cute, be clean, show me what you're doing. For some reason, everyone, when they start pitching, always wants to like put in new characters or totally like mix everything up, you know? I'm not looking for that. Use the assets the show already has, use the characters the show already has. If you want to find a dirty secret, watch a lot of like Twilight Zone and original series Star Trek.
The entire Twilight Zone.
Those kinds of episodes come up all the time. Every kids show I've worked for at some point has like an Apocalypse Now reference.
The one with the doll that comes to life.
The doll that comes to life always comes back. Amazing Journey always comes. Like there are a core group of ideas, movies, stories, and especially those older TV shows where they didn't have to twist it, you know? They just put the bald, bland structure on there. Being able to know that structure and then remix that structure for your show shows me that, you know, hey, I kind of know that story. I know that's going to have a solid base. So originality is great, but it's not as much of a virtue as solid structure.
Yeah, exactly what Margaret just said. And I mean, like, I'm kind of coming at this from like a limited writing experience, but the amount of times I've heard, like in the attempt to be like, this is so creative and new, kind of just like abandoning any sense of story structure because it's so creative and new. And I'm like, where are we going? So there are reasons certain things are done over and over again because like it's different between being like, oh, this is a cliche. And then there's certain things where it's just like, you have to set certain things up so they can pay off. So I would say like, just, especially when you're just starting out, don't think too much about being like, this is the newest idea. Try to always focus on stories that are coming at characters from a very sincere place, that are, if it's an ensemble show, make sure that everybody has kind of a clear voice, and it's not just like anyone could say any of these things. Like everybody is uniquely themselves in each situation. And
you know what I love? Oh, sorry.
I'll go for it.
Any pitch that is really the most common thing that gets changed in a pitch is the A story, is the plot and the stuff that happens. If you've got a good angle on the relationships or a new area to explore and establish dynamic, like that's really interesting. And that often, like that sort of like B story can often get like, well, let's take that and let's relayer whatever other MacGuffin we're doing with. But I really like that you point out that these two characters haven't had an episode that hashed out what, you know, this problem or this issue. So you can have a lot of success. And it's a good sign for me if writers are, like you said, really focused on drilling down into the relationships of the major characters and seeing if they can find a new dynamic or a new way to express that dynamic.
Exactly.
Can I ask us a real quick question on that?
Yeah.
How does somebody who's like pitching a story to an established show, how do they get it to you? Like I know Star Trek, you know, like Star Trek has a history of accepting spec scripts. Do animated shows do that? Like
absolutely not. In fact, I've never met a show that would even read a spec of their own.
Yeah.
That's why I actually don't mind getting a slightly older animation spec, especially if it's of a really established character. I feel like that can show mimicry. Like no matter what version of Spider-Man you're writing, we know what Spider-Man is supposed to sound like, you know? Like I know what to expect in a Batman or Superman style episode. Like having a couple of specs, even if they're from a show that's concluded, but that showcase like a major sort of, you know, canonical kind of character is not as much of a problem for me as like, I literally wouldn't pick up a spec for a show that I was working on.
Yeah, I think there's legal reasons.
Yeah, that's huge. It's huge legal issues.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, in my experience, when I'm being hired by story editors and stuff, like they look at the stuff you've already written or like specs from shows that already exist, but they also look at your stuff. Like first, I have this one horror script. It has gotten me more kids animation jobs than anything else. I'm like, what do you see? Like, you'd be surprised because it's the things that, much like when you're boarding for yourself, it's the things you write for yourself that is the most like honest to you voice. So like story editors and writers and showrunners, they see it in the script when they read it. Even if you're talking about material that is older, they kind of get a sense for your pacing and your understanding of story structure. So like, don't feel like you have to tell the episode for the show that you're going for to get hired on that show, because like someone can see through a script your potential to write for other types of things.
All right, awesome. Okay, We're down to our last two questions.
We're doing it.
This is Jorge and Mairghread. What's that process like of getting into the industry as a writer as opposed to visual artists?
Oh, okay. Sorry, Jorge,
Go for it.
I do a lot of comic book panels. So there are a few paths to come up as a writer. One is through production. You get hired on a show. At entry level, it kind of doesn't matter what position, assistant to a writer, writer's assistant, script coordinator, PA, whatever it is, like, but you get in that show and you start telling everyone you want to be a writer. And then you start getting in front of the writers, and then eventually one of them takes pity on you and, you know, decides to let you shadow them or sit in the room or whatever. And that's how that relationship develops. You can get representation or work at an agency. That's a little trickier because essentially they're going to have to leverage their relationship with other writers to get you in front of them. You can go to a contest, you know, like Nickelodeon, and I think a couple other, there are fellowships in animation. Those are real things that work. And the other thing is just straight raw bugging people. going to WonderCon, going to animation panels, finding people who wrote episodes, like, you know, who are story editors on shows you like on Twitter. Like, writers aren't hard to find. And at the end of the day, all of this is to get your face in front of anyone with the word story editor or hire in front of them, because ultimately they're going to be the person that gives you your first script and starts passing your samples around to other people. So that's my spiel. What do you got, Jorge?
Hopefully it's changing, but when I started writing, there was this little box, and if you were an artist, people didn't think you could write, and if you could write, people didn't think you could be an artist, and everybody was kind of segmented and somewhat segregated, and it was really tough. So I mean, breaking into writing for me was super hard. I mean, CalArts didn't even have a screenwriting program for animation when I went. So I had to go to other departments to learn how to do it. And it just boggled my mind. Like, why wouldn't we learn how to write scripts and work in animation? So I started out, it was super, super, super difficult. My first writing stuff, basically, I wrote for free. I was like, I just want to learn and get notes. I would submit ideas, submit stuff. Brandon Sawyer, who I'm sure Marc, you know, kind of took pity on me and let me write a script for him, and just killed me with notes. But, you know, it kind of gave me a lot of ideas on how to do it. And as an artist, you read all these scripts and you start picking out, wow, this one's really good. I wonder why this one's good. And honestly, I wonder why this one isn't that good. And so you are consuming scripts. And for me, that was the key. The moment I equated it to drawing, it became, oh yeah, the more you do it, the better you get at it. Like with everything else, like with pitching, everybody sucks at first, right? It's like doing stand-up. Everybody's going to be terrible in the beginning, but the more you write, like in drawings, we were always told 1,000 drawings, and drawing 1,001 will be the good one. Well, I think with writing, it's the same. The more you write, the better you get, the more you get confident. And so for me, it became writing, you know, honestly, the credits became really important to me, and just getting on shows and starting to do freelance scripts, you start building your way up. And then when I jumped to feature, it was like the hardest thing in the universe, because just because you can write for TV, there's a snobbery in feature where they think, well, you don't know how to write for features. And, you know, I was being told this by people who worked on, you know, Bambi 3 or something. And those, it's not like those are Citizen Kane.
Dude, Bambi 3 is actually weirdly good. If I remember correctly. The one where it's the
dad
with his dad.
Yeah,
that was
weirdly
actually
solid. Like
yeah, like Cinderella Twist in Time also like.
All right, terrible example. I haven't seen Bambi 3. Anyways, so I think for artists who want to make that jump, and especially directors, I got punched in the face emotionally by name dropping Guillermo del Toro, who said, if you don't write, you're not a real director. And so that kind of punched me really hard. So for me, writing became a necessity, as far as if I want to tell my own stories, I have to write my own stories. So I don't know if there's any good advice in there, peppered with some sort of advice, but I will say writing is just as hard as every other position in animation. And if anything, I think it's where everything falls apart. If the writing's not good, beautiful art will not save it. Beautiful voice performance will not save it. Beautiful CG, incredible budgets. If the writing's not there, there's nothing.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Yeah, it's definitely. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Okay. But like what you were saying, like, especially the more that I'm in the director position, like the capacity to see story problems has saved my tail and saved, like, because once it's boarded, it's like, well, those are hours and hours of work. And then you see it in animatic, you're like, yeah, that story still doesn't work. So if you can catch it before anyone has started drawing, like, it's super important to like familiarize yourself with like, ooh, that's like a weird thing we set up that we kind of never address again. Maybe we didn't need to set that up. Like becoming alert to writing. Like I recommend, like, even if you have no interest in going into writing, like read scripts, start understanding why certain scripts work. It'll make you a better board artist. And if directing is an end goal, it'll make you a stronger director.
I have a live question here that I'm just going to toss in, even though we weren't going to. Someone's asking, like, what are the importance of agents and managers for animation writers? Like, do you need them? Do you not need them? You know, how does that work?
You don't need them right off the bat, because they're not really, writers hire people that they know or that they learn about. You definitely don't need both in animation unless you're really high up. Where representation becomes important, also in freelancing and when you're very starting out, you're not really going to be negotiating all that much. It's kind of going to be take it or leave it. This is the union rate. Representation becomes important when you start pitching your own shows and when you start having to talk to executives about developing shows and when you're a little higher up. But it's not something I didn't get repped for years. I know some writers who, you know, they just like writing episode to episode kind of guys and they don't have any representation. So if you do get representation, make sure they're working for you. Make sure they're picking up the phone, make sure they're talking to you, and make sure they're earning that 10%, and also be talking to them and ask how you can utilize them. But it's much more important to just do whatever you can to get in front of the face of story editors and head writers.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the last question.
Let me say, this is the last of the pre-screened questions.
Pre-screened, yeah.
5 questions before we call it a night.
Right. We're not calling it a night yet. If you guys can hang out. But if any of you guys, this has gone longer, if you need to go, the panelists, feel free to go. It would be great if you stayed. But, you know, we all have lives and, you know, anyway, you know that. Okay, so this is to Paula and Jorge, but since it's the last question, please, you know, anybody jump in. The pandemic has left us without the opportunity to be interns at studios or take advantage of training programs. What should my priority be right now? Do I focus on building up my portfolio or should I try to get started working freelance?
I'm going to jump in and say both. This is a magical time. You know, going back a little bit about the equipment, I think, you know, again, terrible advice, get a credit card and buy the best computer you can buy. It's going to be more expensive for you to not have equipment right now than to have it. You know, what better motivation than having to pay that credit card? I'm of the belief that especially when you just graduated, there should be a fire of fear behind you to motivate you. So surf the fire, surf the fear. You know, we live in a chaotic world. I'm super jealous of all of you who are graduating right now because, God damn it, you're gonna have the best bragging rights that you graduated during a global pandemic. You are now gonna be bulletproof. You will survive everything. So I think this is a magical, magical time. You should be working on your personal stuff. You should be working on your portfolio. You should be going online, and you know, if you want to be a character designer, just bombard yourself with all the beautiful character designs that are out there. See what motivates you, and just sort of embrace all that. We're in a very, very special time where everybody's stuck at home. So all those jobs are now, especially entry-level jobs, it's wide open. It really is wide open right now. And animation, you know, I work at Netflix. They freaking greenlight a show every day. It's kind of crazy. So they did the math and they will run out of professional people in LA. So that opens it up for students who are graduating. And there's a ton of rock stars that are getting amazing jobs right out of school, but they did the work. They did the hard work, and it's paid off. So this is a magical time. Take advantage of it. It's there for the taking.
It's true. It's true. Like when I got my job, it was right at the tail end of the golden age of the mid 90s. And a little bit after I got that job, it dropped off because this industry is constantly going up and down. And right now we are up, and now is a really easy time, or not easy, a good time to jump in. Paula, do you want to say anything?
You know what? Jorge said everything I I would have said, I maybe would have not said, rack up the bills on your credit card, but frankly, it's good for the economy now. So go ahead, just fucking buy one. And there's no reason to wait. God damn it. Try to get a job.
Yeah, try to get a
Hug
job.
me.
Are they having even internships right now? Like, how is that working? I don't know the answer to that.
Cartoon Network finished off their CNS Academy program because they had already started, but the interns, they canceled because there's nothing going on in-house.
Yeah, there's not much.
Don't worry about it. You're always going to be working on your portfolio, because all this stuff you're doing that Jorge is telling you to do, you need to do it, and that's going to be your portfolio while you're looking for a job. Go get a job.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody else?
It's about just investing. You just got to invest in yourself. That's what you're doing right now. Just invest in yourself. Use this time, an hour a day, 2 hours a day. What are those plans for the future? Don't just think about, oh, I can't get a job in the industry right now, it's impossible. But think about when everything opens up again. Think about that connection, those conventions that are going to appear again next year, that you're going to have a portfolio ready, that you didn't waste this time being upset and nothing's happening and nothing's going on and this is impossible. It's just, I'm going to use this time right now to work on towards what might happen potentially for myself in the future.
Can I ask a question for the artists? Because I know as a writer, one of the things I see happen to young writers is they'll be trying to work on a spec or something, or they'll be trying to work on a pilot this happens a lot. And they spend so much freaking time trying to polish this pilot to perfection that it's like, well, what do you got? And they only have like one thing, you know, or they only have like, or it's not even finished yet.
Yeah.
And I kind of have started to try and advise writers that like, look, if you don't know you're making it actively better, you're done. Now other people need to see that and you need to move on to the next thing. Because I find that, especially out of college, people can start to get really obsessive about making something perfect when really they're just making it different.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same.
Oh, go ahead, Latoya.
Oh, no, Jeanette, all you. Sorry.
Are you kidding? I'm not even supposed to. I'm just. Go ahead, Latoya. Honestly.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing. Yeah, it is exactly the same in art. And I was that kid, so I feel you on the, like, the pupils aren't quite right. Like, you start, like, questioning your sanity after a while. If you start feeling like you've drawn the same line 4 times, move on. Like, it's time to move on. And, like, especially on boarding, like, it's not about, like, I mean, draftsmanship is important, but it's not the drawing quality. Is it telling the story? Is the pose expressive? So perfection is not only impossible, it's not in the budget. So like just being really aware of the like making things will make you better, not obsessing over the one thing.
I think the main thing that made me good at what I do now is that when I was in college and a little bit outside of college, I did a daily comic strip and I had a 5 o'clock deadline every day. And I had to like, and some days they were terrible, but it was like, okay, it's done. Now we have tomorrow and that one's going to be better. And you just have to keep moving forward. If you get stuck and mired on polishing something that wasn't good, trying to make everything perfect, you'll never progress. You are going to get stuck in that. And that's not to say that you shouldn't occasionally polish something, but yeah. Good to keep moving forward, I think.
I'm curious now, Latoya, based on what you were saying, I'm curious though, now that you're a director, being able to resist the urge to over-engineer something or go over and over and over, that's gotta be a struggle, right?
It is such an interesting challenge where it's like, and it's something that, because nobody really teaches you how to direct is the thing I've realized, or it's like you just are one day not boarding anymore and they're like, here are other board artists, now you're in charge of a team. And like that, there should be a whole course on that. But yeah, it's learning when to let things go and really choosing your battles. And I'm sure Marc, you and Jorge can speak to this too, where you're just like, this scene, we're gonna let that scene be here. So I can spend way too much time making this other very important to me scene really work. Like
Exactly. All right, I think we should move on to the Q&A.
Yeah,
Right,
so I feel obviously we don't have a lot of time. We've already hit 8 o'clock. So for any like wait, don't wait, what is the show called? Wait, don't hear me.
Tell me.
Don't yes. I'm like, I'm getting tired, clearly. We could just go through some of these questions and try to answer them as fast as possible. It'll be like lightning.
Yeah, like when lightning answers.
Yes, exactly. So I have a question from Devin Adams specifically for Roger. And this question is, what is something studios expect background artists to know? And actually, Emily, you can obviously weigh in on this as well. But is something that schools don't teach?
This is going to be very biased because, okay, so I used to teach for CGMA for quite a few years. But I hear from a lot of art directors that people don't know perspective. It gets skipped a lot of the time somehow in art school. And, you know, even board artists should know it.
Yeah, that was one of the first classes that I took when I got a job in animation. And it was like, even though I'm not a BG person, as for boarding, it was like, I gotta know this. So.
Not just, yeah, like Janelle was saying, not just for making backgrounds, but you're now part of a team, you're part of Storyboard, your work needs to hook up with everyone else. So knowing proper perspective and knowing how to line things up is part of that.
Also, board artists now, like sometimes we draw the backgrounds before the BG artists get it because they're trying to base what they are drawing off of what we need for the scene. Right, Roger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a back and forth.
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase a question that Josh Isaac asked, which is he's been applying to a lot of jobs, and so far he's only heard back from a small portion of them. They were all rejections. And he's trying to figure out, is it that he's just feeling demoralized and confused about whether it's, you know, is he just not a good candidate, or is it the industry with everything that's going on with the pandemic making it more difficult to find a job right now?
I'll take this one, actually. So when I was first applying for jobs, I felt that exact emotion where you would just like send an application off into the void, never to be heard from again, and then have an existential crisis. So like, feeling it, you're not alone. Know that a lot of the first layer of vetting things, there's a lot of automation, especially with the larger studios. Like, it takes a minute to even reach a person. So it is not that they're like, oh, he's not good enough. It might literally be that that position was already filled, or that position no longer exists. I do wish that there was better systems at a lot of the studios of replying to things. What I would recommend actually is, rather than just applying to jobs, start reaching out to recruiters too. Like, I know especially at Netflix, a lot of the recruiters have a huge Instagram and Twitter presence. They have made themselves abundantly reachable. Find them. Their job is to find artists. Hunt those people down. They are posting jobs before the jobs are posted on like job websites. They are people you can reach out to before their jobs posted, is like, hey, so I want to do this. I know there's no jobs like this, but here's my portfolio, just so you know. Like, a lot of times, and at Disney too, the recruiters hold on to portfolios, even if the position doesn't exist for you yet. Like, they'll be like, oh, okay, I remember this person's work. Hey, are you still looking? So like, in addition to applying for jobs from job postings, start targeting the people who are looking for artists.
I think it's like getting professional help too, really professional, like really your portfolio just might not be up to par. That's reality. Like, you just don't have the right stuff in there, and that's what's going on. Your draftsmanship skills may not be there. Your observation skills, there could be so many things. So when I say get professional help, make sure you're not just showing your mom and your dad and your friends, because they're always going to tell you how great everything is, right? They're your friends and family and mom and dad. So just, if you can, this is where having that opportunity to reach out to professionals and say, listen, I want to do this in the industry. What advice, where am I going wrong? And then you just need to really hear it.
Do not accept a decline without feedback. If you get a rejection letter from a studio, if you've submitted something, always make sure, try to, like Latoya said it, like build a relationship with that recruiter. But really what you're looking for there is, I need to know why you didn't accept my application. I need to know why you didn't like my portfolio. You need feedback from every single place that rejects you, if you can get it. And then you start to collate. Oh, everybody is saying the same thing. My reel is way too long and it's a little old. And then you can figure out where it is that it may be going wrong.
You do get ghosted a lot, though.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's happened to all of us. Okay.
Okay, so I have a question from Jacob Halton. He says, where would you recommend finding material to base storyboards on? I'm trying to make good boards that tell the story well visually, but not sure where to find story material other than looking up spec scripts that weren't produced. Any advice?
I have advice. All best stuff that I always see is when people board something that happened to them, and then the story goes crazy. Like it elevates to some fantastic level, because there's an arc to that visually, and there's an arc to that in the story, and you get to sort of get a glimpse of who this person is. So that's why anytime people board themselves doing something, it's almost like you get three layers: storytelling, actual story writing, and also a little bit of a glimpse into their personalities. So I always say board stuff. First time you got in a fight, first time you broke up, so first time you got punched in the face. Like pick a moment of your life and then board it.
Yeah, it
I
doesn't
love
have to be long. It doesn't have to be too long, like a little vignette.
I heard a couple directors tell me, one said, hey, board a joke. It has a beginning, middle, and an end. You can do something snappy. And someone else said, do something that people are familiar with. Could be Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, right? And you're showing your version. It's something that maybe that particular that person knows, so they're not maybe so confused sometimes. So I think the thing is just keep it short, right?
Keep it short, definitely. And this just might be a thing I enjoy. I like people, I've noticed a lot of young border artists boarding musicals, like boarding songs from musicals. And I love that, because it's like, obviously most of the time the play doesn't have that much staging because they're on a literal stage. So seeing how a board artist is like, oh, and then the camera's here. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is amazing. And it like, if you like that sort of a thing, like just have fun with it. And like, it doesn't have to be very long. It could literally just be a snippet from something. But yeah, completely with Jorge and Stephen.
So we've done a pretty good job answering a lot of the questions. I have one more, and that is, what are some entry-level positions that can lead to working in visual development?
I gotta say, visual development is the hardest job to get into because it looks like it's the most fun and the most freeing, but man, it is the most competitive because you are competing with the creme de la creme of every studio, all the top artists. So anytime I hear a student say, "Oh, I want to go and do visual development," that's like I want to play for the the Lakers. Like you might have to start at a smaller team and work your way up. It's a tough thing. I've seen a lot of visual development people get their start in production and then jump into prop design and move on to background design and then visual development. And then if you are a visual development artist, you have to be really good at backgrounds and really good at characters. And not that many people are amazing at those two things. So it's a really hard job to get into. But I think you can get it in through character design or through prop design. I mean, obviously it's different in every studio, but that's where I've seen that sort of journey get in there.
Great.
Well, we got, okay, one other question. Sorry, someone just posted this. It says, I've heard from other professionals that the standard for storyboarding portfolios is at least 100 slides. Is this valid?
Slides. I feel like probably, just because if you're boarding, to be honest, I normally don't count panels. For me, it's however many panels are needed to tell the idea and really sell the action. I would recommend that if you don't have Storyboard Pro and you're interested in going into storyboarding, at least for television, like try to get your hands on it. They have a lot of tutorials, they have like student pricing and stuff, but it has become more or less industry standard for TV boarding. And it makes it so easy to just like go from shot to shot to shot to shot that it doesn't, I know in Photoshop, even with the groups and stuff, it can get a little unwieldy to build a long board. But yeah, I don't know, Marc and Jorge, do you guys have like a specific lens? Yeah.
Not really. I mean, and these days you just click. The cuts work. So I don't even, it's basically like, oh, this guy's great at staging. And, usually we go, are they good at action? Are they good at comedy? And are they good at acting? Those are the three. And if you're good at all three, you will have a job forever and ever.
Yeah.
Because every production needs, the one job that every production needs the most are storyboard artists. So I would really encourage people to really, 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 if you are desperate to pick a thing, just the economics of it, I think storyboarding is really, really, there's a lot of jobs there. And if you look at directors, a lot of directors are now coming in TV and in feature, coming from storyboarding. They used to come from animation, but now it's mostly coming from story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about storyboards, but I will say submission requirements in general, as far as I've seen in the industry, usually are pretty bogus in the sense that a talented person is talented and you'll spot that. And it doesn't matter if they don't have a reel that's 2 minutes long or their stuff isn't in the right order or anything like that. We'll pick up on it and we'll go for it. I've seen people hired just from student films that didn't have professional work and, vice versa. So yeah, I would say don't worry so much about that.
I just kind of want to just mention just with the storyboarding is that just what I know most directors struggle with the most is when, from what I've heard over and over again, is that the board artist doesn't know how to act. And then that's usually if the board artist is that there's not acting in there, then they become just, it gets hard and harder, puts more work on the director gets more frustrated because they're working and fixing everyone's boards. So really learn how to act. And the same thing if you want to be a character designer, just observation, acting, you can use this for everything. And those are great things. And like Jorge said, it's like having dynamic action, having humor, having staging, having emotion, and putting that in your boards, putting that in your characters, putting that in your props, in your backgrounds, writing. It's all the same stuff. Just don't go into this with the mindset of is there an entry level just to get me in? There really isn't. There's a PA position, but everyone wants a professional now. Everything's moving at this pace. There's no time to sit there and train you. There's too many people. There's too many things. So just practice.
Alexi, there was one question that someone had asked in the chat, but I really liked it. And they were talking about if the studios were I'm trying to find the question. It's like miles and miles away.
I have it right here, Latoya. I was just about to bring it up.
Oh, thank you, Jeanette, for being much more. It's like, where is it?
Jump in and like, we got to talk about this. And I hate wedging it in at the end because it's such an important thing. Are you seeing systematic change and anti-racism in animation, especially over the last week? So, Latoya, do you want to answer that?
I can jump in because, or if you want to.
Too,
yeah, I think everybody, this is something that we all really do need to talk about. And that, for me, has been the most important effect that these kind of heartbreaking times have had, is that everyone is talking. Like, I was so relieved that when I went back to work, whatever that means in the age of Rona, on the Monday after like the first wave of protests, we all talked, like the crews and the studios, and it's not like some sort of weird like, no, nobody talk about how the world's on fire. Like, the industry is aware, and the industry is becoming more conscious and more comfortable with kind of talking about the very real issues that people are facing right now. And I think as far as like inclusion in the animation field, up until now it's been very much on the crews. Like, each crew kind of puts together the landscape of the crew that Like people just bring in the people that they know or that they've worked with. And I think more and more, my hope is that the studios will start taking more of an active role. And so it won't be on people like Bruce Smith to be like, let's hunt down, there must be more than 2 Black female directors in the world. Like, so it's like, so like, it'll be less of just like one person's feverish attempt to find many different representations and more of like, okay, let's really all be included here and more than just like a log line in an email. But,
so one thing that that I wanted to touch on with this is that one thing that the Guild does is that we have communities usually between crafts, or like we have a QT, a queer tag committee. We just, our committee system is like a recent thing that we've been building up over the past 3 years. And we need all types of committees, because as board artists and as artists, we all work on our own in front of the computer. And if you are like, I'm Mexican and Roger is Japanese, right? Japanese American. And, you know, we all, and, you know, Latoya, of course, is Black. And you feel isolated as an artist already because you're getting the work in. Even as a writer, you're spending a lot of time by yourself working. But then when you are the minority on a crew, you feel even more isolated. And my hope is that with the Guild, that we can connect these disconnected artists and people, either if they're separated by craft or even like by distance. If we're in this Rona thing and we're all distant, we have to figure out a way to bring people together. And the way that what happens with that is that the way that we can support each other with work, if things come up, is with these communities, right? And I don't know, I'm hoping that we can, as a Guild, make space. And we have had studios come to the Guild hoping to help them do this, because we are in a unique position to help the studios get there, you know? Because studios have legal requirements that they have to meet as far as employment and even how to reach these different communities. So I'm hoping that we can make this space and people will fill it, and we can have a community and have real systematic change, because that's what needs to happen. And this can't be just a conversation for like the next few months until some other distraction comes along. This has to be like permanent, you know? And the way that happens is by becoming part of the system. And that's one of my big goals as the union president. And hopefully we can get there.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't want to I don't want to drag this on, but this is something I've been thinking about a lot since I saw that question, and I wanted to get your guys' opinion as an artist. I can't speak to this on the racial side, but I remember coming up and really struggling in networking as a woman, because I found that a lot of my male friends would, you know, they would do the like, let's go get drinks or let's go hang out, and like they really kind of took the friendship tact with trying to, you know, hang out with their bosses or hang out with their buddies. And I found myself kind of being a little bit locked out of that, because I felt like, not from a bad way, but honestly, I felt like people were a little more nervous about taking a young woman out after work to hang out with her, you know, or something. So I found that just to try and give people like a practical, like what are some practical tips that these kids can use? I found for me that formalizing a little more when I was reaching out to upper management, like, hey, can we set a time to have a meeting, or I want to learn more about this specific style of writing, or can you do something for me? And like really sort of framing everything as like, I'm trying to get ahead in this business, you know, what can you help me about this business, was really successful to me, because it kind of made things a little more neutral. I don't know how people, is that applicable to artists? Is that also work on the racial end where people are sort of, I don't know, like, does that help anyone?
I get what you mean. I feel like recently, online communications and just sort of starting, like if somebody asks a question of like, hey, I am interested in this. Do you have any tips for boarding or stuff like that? Just in framing that idea, like if you're trying to get in from like fresh out of school, get in, reaching out to people, not in a, and always kind of in that understanding that like they have a life and kids and like a myriad of other things, you don't know what's going on. So they might not get back to you immediately. It might take a minute for them to like say that, but like I do genuinely try, and I think a lot of industry people do genuinely try that. Like if somebody is reaching out and is like, hey, I'm kind of at a loss of where to begin. Here are some questions, like, because sometimes you just need someone to like point you in a direction and you can start moving in it. But yeah, I know what you mean. If it's like, oh, I don't know if it is, I think it's on a personal level. Like if you feel comfortable, because I definitely, when I was in a studio, would be like, so I'm a PA, but I'm really interested in being a board artist director person. And here is a board I've done on my free time. If you happen to have some free time, director person, like, so it's all on your own comfortable, like comfort level. If you feel comfortable kind of putting yourself in front of someone in a more like friend, casual, do it. I feel like if that makes you uncomfortable, then framing it in the more professional, like, hey, I'm looking to do this. Can we set aside some time? Like, it seems, I feel like most people are pretty adaptable to either of those, and it's just whichever feels most natural to the person.
So do you think it's getting better? I mean, it's only been like a minute, right? I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's too early really to answer that question, because I feel like we all have a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
Right?
it feels like, yeah.
Oh, sorry. It's funny because I put Shira as my background. My experience on that particular show, at least this isn't like an answer to how we could solve it, but I know I was on a show that was particularly diverse and very conscious of being so. And because the crew makeup was sort of reflected in that, it was started to be, hopefully people can start having more concrete and detailed conversations about their differences and being open about doing so and helping people communicate with each other because of that. And I think that's sort of a start of having people be more, being able to socialize with each other honestly and not be uncomfortable. Like if we can actually start, being able to recognize each other's differences and being able to know where people's, where they're coming from, like not just having, and it's again, it's not just about being a certain race, because we're talking about other things. It's about, where on any sort of sexual identity or spectrum you fall in, like a lot of that is still not very well known, like to the general public. But I was able to have certain conversations with people about it because you become aware of it. And once you understand who someone is, then you can start talking about other things, right? Because it's not hanging over you anymore. We're like, oh, I get, now we sort of know each other more. So I was very hopeful from that experience. And I think it starts with, I don't know, being able to talk to each other about certain things. And I think the past week and things about that have started people to be more open to discussing these things where they would have been very uncomfortable in the past. Mm-hmm. And it's about coming from a place where you're being respectful of the other person and knowing that there's an attempt, a genuine attempt, right? To like, get to know someone. That's all.
Yeah. I think I'm like you, Roger. I'm heartened by the fact that we are having conversations that are not always like, they're kind of awkward sometimes, or they're kind of like, I don't know where to begin. But the more you have those conversations, the more those conversations become like normalized, if that makes any sense. Like it becomes less of a like, I have to keep all these aspects of my experience secret so no one knows I'm other. Like I feel like we're shying away from being like, oh, this is what is acceptable and this is other. Like, especially on Proud Family, like that crew has been such a phenomenal, for me, beacon of like, just get in here, everybody get in the show. And it's like, and don't be afraid to share your experience. And that's very much on the crew. Unfortunately, right now, it's very much on the shows themselves. And I'm sure Shira had a similar experience to set the tone where crews feel comfortable kind of communicating openly and sharing experiences and getting to know each other.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we could talk on it a little. You know, I hate wedging it in at the end. It's such a big, okay, I have to pick up my little whiner. So I guess we're wrapping it up now because Tito has said it's time for me to feed him. Okay, so Alexi,
Well, I just want to thank everyone for participating in the panel, for devoting time tonight to speaking with all of our students who are here representing so many different schools across the United States. So thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, this has been really awesome. Thanks for staying much longer than we had told you it would be. But yeah, we hit a lot of stuff, and hopefully we can do more of these in the future. And we're hoping for the best with all of you students, and reach out to us, please, for like advice, or, you know, we'll answer as best we can. And we wish you the best of luck. Hopefully you were able to get something out of this, and hopefully we can do more of these in the future. So thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks
Good, everyone.
Thank you so much, you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Tito. Say goodbye to Tito.